Hi, my name's Dr. Mitchell Harley. I'm from the UNSW Water Research Lab, and I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me to this fantastic workshop on ICOLLS. And today I'm going to present to you a citizen science project for monitoring coastlines known as CoastSnap. It's a global citizen science project, and it's particularly suited to monitoring things like coastal inlets, which are extremely dynamic and are often located in nearby coastal communities. So CoastSnap, just to give you a bit of an outline, CoastSnap began back in 2017 as a pilot project. It started as a collaboration with the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry, Environment, and you can see here some of the main players involved in that 6-month pilot project, specifically Dr. Mike Kinsella on the left, Larry Pace, who's our technician at the lab, Elena Sanchez Garcia, Rebecca Dowsett, and myself. So it began just as a pilot project on Sydney's northern beaches, and in that 4-year space of time, we've actually grown quite considerably, such that we now have a global coastnet network of coastal monitoring, and we now have over 110 CoastSnap stations in 16 continents worldwide, where we're collecting a huge volumes of data with a whole bunch of participants all united in collecting this coastal change information. So quite a huge network these days in quite a short period of time. We've grown quite rapidly to where we are today. First of all, I'd just like to talk about what is exactly CoastSnap. So the idea about CoastSnap came about because, well, everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, and we're actually in a golden age of image acquisition. So with smartphones and the quality of the images that you collect today, and all the various social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all sorts of things. Everybody every day is uploading millions and millions of images and video content. And so the idea about CoastSnap was there's just one small way to try and harness some of these images to actually get some decent scientific data. So what is CoastSnap? Basically, it's a very simple idea. It involves these stainless steel cradles installed at fixed locations overlooking the beach, as you can see here at our first station here at Manly Beach in Sydney. And that camera cradle is quite clever in that it controls the camera position and the angle of the photo to a certain degree of tolerance. And then, because it's always the same position and angle, repeat photos over time from the public are used to track changes to the coastline across multiple different timescales, whether it be before and after extreme storms, over seasons, years, and who knows, even decades if we continue well into the future. So this kind of information is useful at multiple levels. Firstly, public engagement and these time-lapse videos that we can create, which I'll show an example of. High quality data using photogrammetry, and I'll explain how that works. And then also, most importantly, I think, is that it actually is used to break down the barriers that we often have between what we do in coastal research and what the public are interested in. So with these images, we can create these, first of all, these very interesting time-lapse movies, as you can see here at our Manly station. So these movies, they're all images collected by the community, and you can see we actually apply some quite clever image stabilization techniques to resolve for all the different types of camera models and things like that. But the most, I guess, the most sophisticated thing about CoastSnap is in its power to actually collect quantitative data about coastline change. And you can read quite a bit about how we do that in this coastal engineering publication that we published back in 2019, Shoreline Change Mapping using crowdsourced smartphone images, where we went out over the 6-month pilot project and actually quantified the degree of accuracy that we can get from these images. And what we could see here on the left, you could see images, you could see shoreline, from our CoastSnap derived method and with in situ techniques using high accuracy RTK GPS. What we've found is with this method, you can actually also collect shoreline change information to an accuracy of about 2 to 4 meters. So how do we go about that? Well, it's basically underpinned by photogrammetry. So And photogrammetry, a key step is the image rectification process, where you see this conversion of image UV pixels, so oblique imagery, as you can see in this left image there. And through the thing called the projection matrix, we can convert this to real world as a top-down or a bird's eye view image. Now, the projection matrix has 11 unknowns. So it has the focal length in the X and Y, skew parameter, and the 2 times principal points. And these are known as the intrinsic parameters. And then we also have the camera extrinsic parameters. So the angle, the tilt and the azimuth, the tilt and the roll, and also the position of the camera itself. So that's 11 unknowns, but what we can do is we can make some assumptions about this, very, very simple assumptions to reduce the number of unknowns, such that we only have four unknowns in the angle, the camera azimuth, the tilt and the roll, and the focal length. Because we're using the camera stand, we know the position of the camera itself, so the camera X, Y, Z. So these 4 unknowns we need to solve for, and we do that using ground control points. So points in the image which we know the exact X, Y, Z coordinates of. So with 4 unknowns, we only need 2 ground control points, but for extra redundancy, we often use a lot more, so 7 in this case. So in these circles here, we actually know that we've gone out and measured these, the X, Y, and Z coordinates using different survey techniques. Of course, not every beach has the advantage of having buildings and things. So this is other sites where we go out. And what we could do, if you look very closely, you could see myself, we actually go with a GPS and walk around the image and take measurements as we go and while we're doing this video. And then from that, we actually can create these ground control points. So we stitch together all the images of us walking around the image, and we actually can use these non-permanent ground control points to actually do this rectification process and solve for the projection matrix. And of course, we go and measure the XYZ position of the camera cradle itself. So through this technique, we can actually, with ground control points, we can actually solve for the camera focal length. And actually what you find is over time with people taking photos, we can actually estimate the smartphone model using the ground control points. So over the 6-month project, what we found was particular models of iPhones were coming up as quite prominent over this time. So that's a pretty cool validation of the technique. So once we have the image rectification, we then use a shoreline detection and elevation model. So we do that by looking at the bird's eye view, the rectified image, and then we use a technique which looks at the red and the blue color channels in the image, recognizing that sand, at least on most coastlines, has a lot of red in it, and water, obviously, in most coastlines have a lot of blue. And then through that, we can actually find the threshold which optimizes the interface between the sand and water as shown in this example. And we take into account the elevation of the shoreline using a tide model or tide observations and estimates wave setup using Stockton formulation. Just a quick thing, all of this process is available for anybody to use via our CoastSnap Matlab GUI, where you can see an example here of a user selecting the ground control points and going about that process to actually rectify and map shorelines. Through this GUI, which is freely available on GitHub, we have a very active user community of people applying this technology all throughout the world. So in terms of community participation, we have some very interesting results that we've seen over the years. At a lot of sites, we have some fantastic community participation. So this is a great site. This is one of our sites in New South Wales in Southeast Australia, CoastSnap Blacksmiths, where we get about, on average, 9.4 images submitted per week. So over an image a day. And as you could see, over that roughly 2-year period, no actual real drop off in the amount of images. So a steady amount of images coming in through time. And interestingly, at this particular site, 91% of the images were submitted via email, as you can see there, with very little coming from social media kind of platforms. This is quite in contrast to other sites. For instance, this is at our Byron Bay site in New South Wales, where we actually see, again, over an image per day, but actually a fair proportion, so 65% of the images coming from via Instagram. And that's because Byron Bay is a very well-known tourist location, has a lot of younger tourists who use a lot of social media channels, and it's also in a very beautiful location and very, shall we say, Instagrammable photo. But because of that, you can also see it was quite vulnerable to things like any downturns in the tourism market, as you can see, some flatlining of the participation due to things like the bushfires we had in Southeast Australia, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. So in 2017 to 2020, we had what we call a semi-automated approach, where we used a whole range of different social media channels, but also email to submit for people to submit by. Just last year, we've moved to a CoastSnap App solution. So the idea is that is towards a seamless pipeline from smartphone to real-time products. And so the idea is with the app now, which is free to download, people can immediately submit their photos, and the end goal is to have a fully automated pipeline for that then on the website to see these photos and mapping the shorelines immediately through time, as well as keeping the Instagram and Twitter channels. So the app was developed by a citizens company known Spotteron. It's based in Vienna. So the great thing is images all around the world can be viewed in real time, and it's designed for international use by the CoastSnap community. So generic terminology, multiple languages, and Creative Commons Zero. So images available to all researchers for any purpose. There are different ways now also to submit. So we have the standard CoastSnap stations, where you can submit at one of our over 100 stations. But we also now have a do-it-yourself option, where users can actually go to their local beach and just find a fence post and start monitoring their own beach without having to install that camera cradle. Or other option is, if you don't even have a fence post, you can actually do a free roaming option. And we also ask questions, some interesting social perceptions about what causes the change as well through the app. So just to wrap up, CoastSnap is also a fantastic opportunity for ICOLLS, which are extremely dynamic. This is our North Narrabeen site. And over the entire year, what you can see in this video is some rapid changes in the entrance dynamics of this dynamic ICOLL, where it opened and closed quite significantly over time. And you could see the beach width changes obtained through this rectification and shoreline detection process. So you can see the ICOLL opening up quite rapidly, and then over time it gradually starts to close and build up, and it closes, and then it opens up as artificially, and then you can see it tending towards closure again, closed, and then it's artificially opened again. So some really valuable high frequency information about understanding inlet dynamics, and also the management decisions to control when these are opened and closed and so forth. So just to wrap up, CoastSnap is continuing to grow. So in terms of future directions at what we see over the next year or two, continued expansion across sites globally. So we're always being contacted by new partners, and we're always happy to collaborate with people. Some things that we're looking at doing are community-driven decision support and coastal change forecasting systems. So actually having the community directly involved with the data collection to develop these decision support and forecasting. Some STEM education packages targeted at young adults, so high schools, colleges, undergraduate education. And also we're looking at things like augmented reality, so applications. So where we can, the historical CoastSnap data over time, we can actually try and display some of this information through the smartphone and so forth. So if you want to keep track of the developments, we have a website at coastsnap.com, and I would encourage you to have a look. Thank you very much.